Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, January 24th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. So today we have a great number of feasts. Surprisingly, most of them are under the advocation Our Lady of Peace. But first, we'll start in Syria, where they celebrate Our Lady of Damascus, going all the way back to 1203. Now, we're told that this icon was brought to Malta by the Knights of St. John in 1530, along with many other icons, after the Knights were driven out of Rhodes in 1523. This icon of Our Lady of Damascus is currently stored in a Greek Catholic church, and John Paul II visited it in 2001. There are many accounts of an oily substance oozing from the image, right? In particular, we're told that in 1203, which is, remember the date we recalled, it was when this image began to exude a miraculous oil to the Sultan of Damascus. And even though he was Muslim, in acknowledgement of this miracle, he made sure a lamp was there perpetually burning before the image. We also celebrate Our Lady of Tears, Madonna del Pianto. I don't know much about the story. And also, this is an interesting one, the Virgin of the Cathedral in Toledo, Spain. Now, this is the day on which, according to an old tradition, the Blessed Virgin Mary, out of gratitude, gave Saint Ildefonsus, who we read as one of the meditations earlier, a blue chasuble, right? So again, that's the traditional date of recalling that miracle when Saint Ildefonsus received a chasuble from the Blessed Mother. And it's because of that feast, interestingly enough, actually St. Ildefonsus we celebrated on, or if you celebrated St. Ildefonsus, it would have been celebrated on January 23rd. So yesterday would have been the feast of Ildefonsus. Traditionally, that's why they celebrated the day after the apparition of Our Lady to St. Ildefonsus. And because of that reason, they celebrate Our Lady of Peace as well on this day. So let's talk a little bit about where they celebrate Our Lady of Peace, right? And we'll talk a little bit about her devotion, right? Because, for instance, all throughout Spain, the vast majority of these things are in Spain or in Spanish-speaking countries. So if you want, I can read the entire list. If you want, you don't have a way to tell me, so I'm going to read it anyways. So, for instance, they celebrate Our Lady of Peace in Lomas de Zamora, Buenos Aires in Argentina, in La Paz, Bolivia. They also celebrate Nuestra Señora del Buen Suceso, Our Lady of the Good Event in Quito, Ecuador. Our Lady of Peace in Belén, Concepción, Paraguay. Our Lady of Peace in Toledo, Castilla-La Mancha, Spain. In Sevilla. In Jaén, Andalucía. In Beas de Segura, Chievar, Marmolejo. In Medina, Sidonia, Cádiz, Andalucía, Spain. La Virgen de la Paz en Ronda, Málaga, Andalucía. Our Lady of Peace in Libertad, Barinas, Venezuela. In Guararito, Portuguesa, Venezuela. In Trujillo, Venezuela. All celebrating Our Lady of Peace today. So you might be wondering, well, why is that the case? And if you are particularly knowledgeable about Marian feasts, then you know that there is another feast for Our Lady of Peace, which is July 9th. Okay. So what's the story? Because they're also celebrating Our Lady of Peace in Honolulu, Hawaii. Why on earth would it be all Spanish-speaking countries and Hawaii? Okay, well, Hawaii is pretty easy to explain. The first Catholic missionaries to Hawaii arrived from France in 1827, and they built their mission on land donated by King Kamehameha III. The priests there dedicated the new foundation to Notre Dame de la Paz, Our Lady of Peace, patroness of their order, which was the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. So near the spot, the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace was dedicated on August 15th, 1843, right? The cathedral celebrates its anniversary on August 16th, since, as you know, the 15th is the Feast of the Assumption. And instead of honoring Our Lady of Peace on July 9th, as does the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts in Paris, the Hawaiians follow the old Spanish date of January 24th, right? So what's the deal with the traditional story here? Well, so actually the feast goes a long way back, right? The tradition holds that in the early 1500s, a certain Jean de Jouy, presented the statue as a wedding gift to his young bride. So this is early 15s, right? So the statue was known as La Vierge de Jouy and became an heirloom of the family. So then it was around 1588 that Jean's grandson, Henri Joyer, joined the Capuchins in Paris, and he brought the statue with him, where it remained for many years. And so she has an olive branch in one hand and the Prince of Peace on her arm, and for that reason, all symbols of peace, the statue is called Our Lady of Peace. So in 1657, the Capuchin community erected an even larger chapel because many people were coming to seek Mary's intercession under that devotion. So on July 9th of that year, 1657, before a large crowd, which included King Louis XIV, the papal nuncio to France blessed and solemnly enthroned the Virgin statue, right? And so Pope Alexander VII would later designate this date, meaning July 9th, as the date for the Capuchin community to celebrate Our Lady of Peace. Okay. So what happened? Well, long story short, the Capuchins were kicked out of their monastery during the French Revolution. They took the image with them in order to save it from the forces of the revolution. Finally, when peace was restored, the statue was brought back out of hiding and entrusted to a Paris priest, Peter Caudrin. In 1800, he became a co-founder of a community of sisters, brothers, and priests, the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, and the Perpetual Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. This is the community that went to the Hawaiian Islands, and they consecrated the Hawaiian Islands under the protection of Our Lady. Okay, so this is also, they celebrate Our Lady of Peace as the patroness of El Salvador, interestingly enough. And so again, this is the feast day in Hawaii and in some other local churches, right? And we might wonder, well, why January 24th, right? Because we said that the feast day is officially in July. Well, again, that's because the city of Toledo has long celebrated the apparition of Our Lady to Saint Ildefonsus on the day after his feast. So his feast was yesterday, January 23rd. Today, January 24th, tradition has that they celebrate the apparition to him, right? Well, in 1085, to celebrate the Moors' return of Toledo Cathedral to the Christians, which took place on January 23rd, St. Alphonsus VI rededicated the Virgin's feast day to Nuestra Señora de la Paz, Our Lady of Peace, right? So in other words, the Spanish speakers, the Spanish literally, from Spain, celebrate Our Lady of Peace on January 24th, which is, again, the day after the Feast of St. Ildefonsus, recalling when the Christians were given back the Toledo Cathedral. And so, if you think about it, yeah, that's a peaceful time. So they dedicated to Our Lady of Peace. And hence, in the Spanish-speaking world, they tend to celebrate Our Lady of Peace on January 24th, right? And then, again, other places have adopted that tradition. It's a very long story to explain why Our Lady of Peace has two feasts. So it goes back to the cathedral in Toledo, Spain, but also it goes back to the crowning of the original image. Last but not least, if you're thinking of starting a novena for the presentation, it starts today because the presentation is February 2nd. And those are the feasts we're celebrating today, January 24th. For today's reading from the Imitation of Mary by Alexander de Rouville, we continue with Book 2, which considers the life and virtues of Mary from the birth of Jesus, her divine Son, to his death. And today we'll read Chapter 7, Love and Esteem of Humiliations. My God, observance of the law of purification must have meant a deep humiliation for your Holy Mother, for that law was meant only for ordinary mothers. The bright virginity which she showed herself so solicitous at the Annunciation was in a sense obscured in this religious ceremony. But she knew that shame and humiliation would one day be your own lot, and she was happy to be able to resemble you. The more you set her apart from other women, the more she wanted to be lost among them, and to hide her special privileges. A soul that, like Mary, seeks only to please God, takes little account of esteem from men, and is not greatly responsive to their homage. One of your prophets says it is better to be a lowly servant in the Lord's house than to have all the pomp and splendor with which the children of this world surround themselves. Virtue is, in fact, safer in a lowly, humble condition than amid honors and distinctions. If it is unknown and hidden from the eyes of man, it is all the more resplendent in God's sight. True virtue alone has a claim on God's attention. If it is unknown to men or even scorned by them, it regards itself as all the more fortunate. Providence that watches over the just often leads them by the path of humiliation to the goal of glorious reward. Self-love undoubtedly suffers when we are humiliated, but humiliation is only the more salutary for that reason. The saints thanked God for the insults they suffered as for a special grace. If I do not feel the same way, it is because I am still a wholly earthly and fleshly man, and therefore do not seek God. Many saints have asked God for great humiliations because their desire of perfection was great. If I do not have the same courage, let me at least accept submissively the humiliations he sends me for my good. I can honor the Lord more through humiliation accepted with resignation to his will than through even the sublimest gift. The Son of God humbled himself, the apostle tells us, even to the point of emptying himself. That is the model I must try to imitate. To have a horror of humiliation is to have a horror for the resemblance to Jesus, which humiliation can give. If God allows me many humiliations, it is because he wants to make the image of his Son perfect in me. I ought to accept a humiliation with the same pleasure and gratitude I would have if I had received a piece of the very cross of Jesus.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.